Welcome to our episode on the power of the exhale. A reminder that our episodes are not to be construed as medical advice. Our intention for you today is to invite you to notice your breath more, particularly the exhale or the outbreath, and how the way you breathe can be advantageous for your physiology.
We hope that you'll discover that the exhale part of the breath is a powerful tool that you can choose to use when and how you need to. And very specifically, you can use it to let go of things, breathe them out, and feel better.
We hope that the takeaways you'll have will include that the power of breath can teach us many life lessons. We simply need to pay attention and apply what our body automatically does into our own day-to-day lived experiences. So we are like over 90 episodes in, and we haven't talked about the breath, and I'm a pulmonologist. So it is due time for us to honor the breath. And so this is one episode of likely more.
And I just want to add that the breath is a big deal in yoga as well. And so it's actually quite funny that we got this far as a yoga teacher and a pulmonologist not mentioning it. And even we did an episode on the heart and honoring diastole, kind of a similar concept before we did the breath. But we were saving this important episode for now because this is the moment. And I want to just reflect that part of the impetus of this episode is Ni Cheng's, it's not her article, but there's an article in Mindful Magazine about the breath and the power of the exhale, which came in my mailbox with Ni Cheng in it. And I said, I can't believe we haven't done that episode yet. And so if you haven't read that article, it's really a beautiful article about the power of the exhale. And I encourage you all to read it and know that it was the inspiration for this conversation today. So tell us about the inhale and the exhale, please.
Well, we're going to start off with the exhale because the exhale breath is kind of on the back burner. It doesn't get as much attention, but the exhale breath can be extremely powerful and is quite important. So ultimately, we know from physiology, from basically the science of breathing, that if you prolong your exhale breath, this helps to activate your parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and digest nervous system. Prolongation of the exhale breath through pursed lips, as if you're blowing out birthday candles. So it sounds a bit more audible. I'm going to do it through the microphone, and I don't know what it's going to sound like, but you blow the exhale breath through pursed lips like. And this actual type of breathing, purslip breathing, is taught in pulmonary rehabilitation to be used when patients are feeling anxious and or short of breath. In particular, if you prolong that exhale breath 2 or more times longer than your inhale, then that helps to activate the parasympathetic vagus nerve activation. The way that you breathe out can help with airway dynamics as well. So when you exhale through pursed lips, you actually induce a little bit of PEEP, or positive end expiratory pressure, that literally helps you stent open airways. And so this technique, even though it's taught in pulmonary rehabilitation for patients with chronic lung disease, can be used by anyone for benefiting your physiology. And another aspect of the breath, especially the exhale part of the breath, that people often forget is that it's passive. And breathing is, I'm quite partial to the breath. I think it is the body's most miraculous function in that there is an automaticity to it. So when we're sleeping and when we're not paying attention to breathing, our body is still going to breathe for us. And particularly about the exhale breath, in order to exhale, the diaphragm actually has to relax in order to come back into a neutral position in the rib cage to push out air. So lots of analogies and metaphors there. But I wanted to start off with kind of bringing it back to the science of it on a pretty basic level.
I just wanted to talk about the relaxing point again, because this came up a few episodes ago and we were talking about diastole. And when the heart relaxes is when it feeds itself, and that nourishes you. And when the breath relaxes, we actually relax the diaphragm, and we're letting go of all kinds of things and creating a physiologic shift that is so, so important. Like when we don't exhale fully, we have all kinds of physiologic problems when we're retaining breath. And so I think we often don't think about relaxation as purposeful and productive and having a true purpose. And so the heart knows and our lungs know, and they both do it automatically. And yet as humans, we kind of override that and we don't prioritize the relaxation phase. And we think instead all about the inhale and all about, systole and pushing hard and doing hard. And our body tells us the importance of the relaxation and the exhale.
Yeah, it's so important to optimize our physiology, is to honor that relaxation in the breath and also during diastole. And our body knows it automatically.
In mindfulness. And that's one of the reasons I think that mindfulness is so powerful, is it gets us into that relaxation phase, and yoga does the same thing. And in that phase, so many important things happen. We just discount them.
So we hope that this episode is going to highlight the importance of that and honoring that. I wanted to also just bring up some life lessons from the out breath. They're applicable to many situations, and these are pretty generalized. So wanted for all of you listeners to think about that there could be potentially circumstances that you can simply let happen for you when we were talking about that relaxation, rather than trying to be in systole or in the inhale phase all the time. Like, could you shift to diastole or exhale? So what might happen for you if you did that, rather than trying to control that particular circumstance? What if you simply let it happen for you?
There's so many parallels to that. And I'm thinking in yoga, one of the concepts that we go to is relaxing in. So when you're in a really difficult pose and you're trying to do warrior 3 or, ego pose, when we fight it and we force it and we try to make things happen, we tend to topple over. But when we relax in and soften, then we're much more able to do some of these more difficult things. And so I think that is a similar, like letting things happen. And how often do we let things happen, especially things that are out of our control? Like, why not just let them happen?
Exactly. And then bringing up the fact that our breath is under involuntary and voluntary control. And that's what makes it so cool for me, and hopefully for others, that you have a choice in breathing, that you can choose to control it, or you can let the body breathe for you. And I think oftentimes we actually forget that we actually have a choice in how we breathe.
Well, that's one of the things that I love about yoga, is that yoga actually delves immediately into that, right? It's like pretty much in every class, we focus on some type of breath, and there are all of these different options. And, as a yoga teacher, I don't go into the pathophysiology of them like you do as a pulmonologist, but they are all designed to think about the timing of the inhale and the exhale and the box breathing and how long you hold the space in between or the space at the end of the breath. And I'm thinking of the 4-7-8 breathing that we did in the last episode, with the very purposeful intention of having the exhale twice as long as the inhale. And then there are other kinds of breathing that we do in yoga where we match the inhale and the exhale to help improve focus, for example. And then sometimes we purse our breath, and sometimes we do alternate nostril breathing to really bring focus to where the air is going and the way of airflow. And as you mentioned in the beginning, sometimes we blow out through pursed breath like birthday candles, and sometimes we breathe in like smelling the roses. And then all of those bring different energy and actually really shift the energy. And that's one of the things that I think I have found most powerful about yoga practice is when you breathe differently in yoga, you can actually use the breath to create energy that you didn't have and shift energy into different parts and really shift your perspective. And so I think we often discount this idea of the air coming in and then the oxygen and carbon dioxide like moving through our cells and through every, I always say in yoga, nook and cranny of your body. I'm kind of famous for that. But the breath is doing the same thing, like literally in every alveoli, it's making shifts, and in every little tiny spot in your body, it's literally a way of exchanging energy.
In talking about shifts that you mentioned, it brought up the aspect of shifting pain and your relationship with pain, and that there's a choice in how you encounter pain when it arises for you. Namely, like for instance, in the body scan practice from mindfulness-based stress reduction, oftentimes there may be areas of the body that have more tension or pain, and lessons are present in terms of how you notice that pain. There's always the invitation to send the breath kind of metaphorically, but also literally to the area of discomfort. Because if you envision at the cellular level, at the capillary interface, like oxygen and carbon dioxide are constantly getting exchanged. And so there are boundless opportunities for shifts for the better if you choose to do so. And that choice is constantly there for us. Well, oftentimes we don't remember that.
The other thing I was thinking of is that when you are in significant pain, and I have actually had several time periods in my life where I had some pretty significant either post-op pain or chronic post-op pain. And when you are in pain, you automatically breathe differently. You tend to hold your breath. You tend to not, actually, it's usually a shallower inhale, but it's also a shallower exhale. And realizing that the breath is a response to pain and also a tool to shift pain. And so I think just realizing how much interplay there is between breath and pain and where we bring our breath. Another thought that comes to mind is one of the things that I notice in many, many physicians that I work with, either in teaching yoga and or in coaching, is that most physicians hold their breath. We don't breathe very often. And during the day, we tend to breathe very shallowly. And I'm not sure exactly what we do with that exhale. I'm actually going to have to start paying attention to that. But what I notice is very shallow breaths. Maybe most people breathe, I understand, like at baseline, you're the pulmonologist, but like 30% of their lung volumes, like we don't really take advantage and we don't really flush it out. But what I see with physicians doing is barely breathing during their busy day. And I wonder if really just an attention to the breath could really shift even our experience of the stress and busyness of the day. And then particularly an attention to the exhale. And one of the things that I really loved in the Mindful Magazine article was the idea of the exhale is letting go of things that don't serve you. And so I often say, like, breathing out the stale stuff or breathing out what you don't want, breathing out stories is what was mentioned in the article. And I think we can use the breath as maybe a courier of bringing in nourishment and letting go of things that are not nourishing or that are harmful. And so I was wondering if you wanted to reflect a little bit on what you said in the article about that.
Yeah, it's actually a very commonly guided part of breath meditation is to envision what doesn't serve you in a particular moment and then to send it out with the out breath. So it becomes like a literal and a figurative release and letting go. So it's tying the mind to the physiologic bodily process of breathing.
The other thing that I wanted to bring up is and this may sound funny, but to me, breathing has like a tone and a cadence. And so like when you could listen to someone breathe, you can kind of tell how they feel, right? If they have that short staccato breath and they're really stressed, the breath is different than when someone's deeply relaxed. Or there are sighs, and there's like a relaxed, peaceful sigh, and there's a like unpleasant, unhappy sigh. And so that our breath almost tells stories in and of itself.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. In our physical exam, the general appearance of someone, you walk in the room and you can tell if there's like mild, moderate, or severe respiratory distress. And that gives you a lot of information about the rest of their physiology. So it's almost like a litmus test for the well-being of someone is in basically how they're breathing and what their appearance is in breathing.
And then we can all learn to use our breathing to get us to a different state of being most of the time. I realize if it's a physiologic problem with the lungs, that's not necessarily true. But for many of us, as a place to address stress or to address suffering, or even to address something like burnout or exhaustion, the breath can be a way to shift our experience of those things, not necessarily changing the circumstances like we talk about in coaching, but changing our experience of them and literally creating energy and letting go of things that are weighing us down.
The breath helps us with our response in difficult circumstances, but we oftentimes forget that.
So I wonder if we could talk a little bit about the different kinds of breathing and different ways. So I mentioned, I think that like matching the inhale and exhale, at least in yoga, we talk about that as a way to focus. So there's a kind of breath called samavriti, which is literally equal parts breath, equal inhale, exhale. And then there's box breathing with the pause in between the inhale and the exhale and the next inhale. And there's 4-7-8 breathing. I think there are a number of different kinds, but I'm curious just to reflect on those kinds and maybe why we use them and places that people can learn more about how to do them.
So for box breathing, that type of box breathing, so you basically inhale through your nose for 4, you hold your breath for 4, and then you exhale through your nose, your mouth for 4 seconds. And then you hold for 4 counts. So that type of breathing is actually taught in Navy SEALs. So it can be used in high pressure situations where you have to focus, and yet you have to kind of remain calm. So calm, focus, awareness, I would say, would be the use for a box breath type practice. And then for the 4-7-8 breath, that's where you are intentionally trying to induce more of a relaxed state. And Purslip breathing is usually used specifically physiologically for people who are experiencing shortness of breath and who have chronic lung disease. And sometimes that 7 count hold in the 4-7-8 breath might be difficult for them because they already have air trapping or hyperinflation, and a breath hold may not be comfortable for them. So just a purslip breath can stimulate still the vagus nerve without that discomfort of a breath hold.
And can you comment on the difference? We often cue in yoga, like breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth, or in through your nose and out through your nose. How does that help? And what does that do in terms of shifting your experience of the breath and or the physiology? Because I think they're innately intertwined.
Yeah. So we remember that in our nose, we have hairs, we have tissue in our sinuses, like our turbinates that help filter the air and also warm the air in. So if at all possible, to try to breathe through our nose. That often is not possible. However, during, for instance, when we have colds, when we have COVID, for instance, or when some people snore, they preferentially mouth breathe. And so it is advantageous to preferentially breathe through the nose as much as possible. When we are exerting an exercise maximally. Um, for some people, it is more comfortable to breathe in and out through the mouth because it feels like you can displace more volume of inhale and exhale breath. But when you breathe in through the mouth, you miss out on the opportunity to warm the air, to kind of clean the air initially. So there are drawbacks, but also benefits to both. And then through the exhale breath, through the mouth, there's a larger airway for your exhale breath to move through, and that can influence the airway dynamics a bit more, especially if you're manipulating like the shape of your mouth during the exhale breath to influence airway pressures, like in the larger airways, for instance, rather than the nose, because you can't really you can't really purse your nostrils. You can flare them.
Well,
but,
in yoga, we just close them. To do
right,
that very intentionally, we use our fingers. I'm not
right,
trying to do that alternate nostril. We just hold them closed.
right. But like
One of
in
the
terms
things
of,
I find in the breath cues also is literally it's just about the focus. As we talked about, like most of our breathing is unconscious. And so it's bringing the attention to the breath and enjoying it and experiencing it. And so if you have to think about where you're going to breathe in and out, it means that you're focusing on the breath and how you're doing it and with intention. We talk about like how we eat and where we eat and what we eat. And I think the breath is actually a little bit the same. It's like how we breathe. It's not where we breathe, but a little bit like where we breathe through. And so noticing that we can pay attention to it when it's helpful for us. And that it's another tool to really simply shift your experience of your life.
and realizing that you have a choice, like you can choose to breathe in and out of your mouth anytime. You can choose to breathe in and out of your nose anytime, so long as the airway passages are patent. And so give yourself the option, like what feels better in the moment. It doesn't have to be one or the other, like letting go of um, the expectation that breath has to be a certain way. Just asking yourself and trying out like what feels best for you in the moment in terms of what type of breath would serve you the best. And then what other aspects of your life are you not paying attention to? So we mentioned a lot that the exhale breath oftentimes doesn't get as much attention, that you're simply letting happen. But if you paid a bit more attention to it, might actually pleasantly surprise you in the lessons that are learned, or in the shifts that can be made, or in the being and in the relaxing of that circumstance.
What I love about focusing on the exhale is that it really is easy. Like it's something that's happening on its own. And so it's really just drawing attention and intention to something that's already happening. I think our minds say that, to make change, we have to do something hard. And yet focusing on something that's happening naturally many times a minute, hopefully, and just enjoying it and using it intentionally can be such a powerful practice with relatively minimal effort.
As always, we like to close our podcast with some reflections for you, dear listener. With non-judgmental curiosity, what's your relationship with your breath? Like, do you only notice it when something's amiss, when you're short of breath, when you're uncomfortable, or when you need it to be something it's not for you in a particular moment?
What do you want to exhale with intention?
What might happen if you start noticing the exhale? And what might happen if you start intentionally prolonging your out breath?
What might happen if you just pay attention to how you are breathing at baseline in any given day and do that with a little bit more intention? So we invite you to join us in the Mindful Healthcare Collective if you haven't yet. It's a Facebook group and a website community. We offer yoga almost every week to practice your breathing. We've had some sessions on breathing. We've had sessions on mindfulness. We offer some free coaching sessions. And it's just a lovely community to join with like-minded individuals who are interested in ways of healing ourselves and healing others with mindfulness. I would also love to have you come breathe with me on a retreat. We actually do a lot of breathing practice on my retreats, and meditating in the golden light at Sagrada is what really comes up here. And we practice the breath as we're sort of in nature, in light, really taking advantage of that beautiful fresh air. And I also have a visual of breathing in the fog in your woods at the Connect in Nature retreat. And so there's a lot of attention at all of the retreats on the breath and how you can learn different, very simple, easy tools to bring back for both your own life enhancement and that of your teams and your family and all those that you love and spend time with.
Please stay on after the sound of the singing bowl for our mindful moment offering. Welcome to today's mindful moment, inviting you to close your eyes or lower your gaze a few inches in front of you, checking in with your body position. You can either sit or stand for this practice, checking in with the alignment to maximize the ability of your lungs to breathe, making sure that the neck is atop your shoulders, atop your hips, perhaps sitting a bit more upright. And in this moment, I invite you to notice your breath at your nostrils. Simply noticing the flow of air in and out of your nostrils, just as it is, without trying to change it. And next, I invite you to pay more attention to simply the exhale breath, the out breath. And next, I invite you to join me for 3 breath cycles of Purslip breathing. So we'll first inhale through our nose, filling up our lungs to capacity like a big balloon, and then blowing out our birthday candles through pursed lips. Seeing if we can prolong that exhale to 2 to 4 times longer than our inhales. We'll do that 2 more times in through the nose, filling up, and then blowing out birthday candles through our mouth. And one last time in through the nose and blowing out. And then coming to rest our attention back on our breath at the nostrils, just as it is. Noticing if there are any changes or similarities in our breath before and after some pursed lip breaths. And once again, shifting our attention to the exhale breath. And as you're ready, blinking open eyes, letting the light back in, taking a moment to notice how you feel now compared to just a few minutes ago. Thanks so much for practicing with me.